tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? Mary Oliver.
At that time, we were the only refugee family here in Carlisle, Pennsylvania. And so people were very keen to attend to us. They were curious about us. Different families from St. Paul's Lutheran Church would invite us to their home. And the first family that brought us in for dinner served us lasagna. My parents tried to eat it. My father did a better job than my mother. My mother couldn't stomach it. We couldn't stomach it. We hated it. My parents are polite. We're a polite family. And so people would ask, how you're enjoying your dinner. My parents would nod and say, we liked it. It's very delicious. And my mother the whole time was like pushing the food around her plate. And so the next family we'd go to would serve the same thing, lasagna. And so the third family and the fourth family. And so for the first 3 months we were here, everybody would serve us lasagna. We thought to ourselves, what is going on here in America? Is there nothing else to eat except lasagna? And so many years later, my father asked one of our sponsors, what was it that made you and everybody else decide to serve us lasagna? He said, you all look like you're Italian, so we made you food that was from Italy.
Forget the idea of going full circle. I feel like the life and career of Baktash Ahadi is doing laps. As an Afghan refugee finding his way in the United States, the massive reverberations from 9/11 hit Baktash from all sides and started him on a journey of service and empathy that has led him to the Peace Corps, back to Afghanistan as a civilian interpreter with U.S. Special Operations, an instructor at the Foreign Service Institute training outgoing U.S. diplomats on their way to Afghanistan, and finally as a filmmaker, using his remarkable life experiences to help frame stories of shared humanity. And as of a month ago, you can count him as a 2-time Emmy Award winner. All this, and I feel like he's still just getting started. I'm Christopher Wurst, and this is
Soft
Power.
Powerful.
Soft
Power.
Powerful Stories.
Powerful.
Soft
Powerful Stories.
I was born in Kabul, Afghanistan in 1981, and that was in the midst of the Afghan-Soviet War, during the Cold War. My parents decided to flee the country in 1984. So my father at the time had ties with the Mujahideen, who were fighting the Soviets on behalf of the United States. So for folks listening, they may know the film Charlie Wilson's War. That really kind of captures that relationship and what the United States was doing in Afghanistan to defeat the Soviet Union. So all that said, my father decided to flee Afghanistan, told my mother, and the next day we were on horseback, climbing through the Hindu Kush Mountains between Afghanistan and Pakistan. The trek was 7 days and 6 nights. We had the Mujahideen to guide us. I was 3 years old, and I don't remember any of it. But this experience, I think, was really treacherous. During our trek throughout the Hindu Kush, Soviet gunships were monitoring the border between Afghanistan and Pakistan because all of the Mujahideen groups that were fighting against the Soviets were based in Pakistan. So they knew that there was a lot of back and forth. And so we were shot at by Soviet gunships twice and nearly died. Later on in life, when I started to document this process and this journey for my parents, I remember my father telling me when the Soviet gunships started to shoot at us, I said, Dad, what did you do in that moment? He said, well, the only thing I could think to do was basically collect you, your mother, and your brother and put us into a huddle, thinking if we were going to die, we're going to die together. Luckily, the Soviet gunships missed us as they were shooting at us, so this happened twice. We eventually ended up making it to Peshawar, and we spent time in Peshawar and then eventually Islamabad in makeshift homes. I share this with you because it really sets up something really magical about the world. My father, in the 1970s, worked as a key punch operator in Afghanistan, and he worked specifically for the USAID office. And the director at the time was a gentleman by the name of Dr. Kerr. He led the demographic study of Afghanistan that's still used, by the way, at the State Department. So my father had the courage to go to the consulate and present his case to seek asylum in the United States. And he brought this letter of recommendation that he had from Dr. Kerr. And the consular officer actually knew Dr. Kerr. And so he called him and asked if Baktash Ahadi and his story and his family checked out. And lo and behold, we did. And so we got approval to come to the United States. We were put on a list. And St. Paul's Lutheran Church from Carlisle, Pennsylvania, decided to sponsor our family. And so we came to the United States. We landed in Harrisburg in January of 1986 when I was 5 years old. And this is where my memory began. And so I recall that experience being such an incredible, I think, moment for our families as arriving into the United States. And the magic and the serendipity of how small the world can actually be. My life has really been about moving between worlds and trying to help people understand each other across those worlds. And it all started from that young, early place in Carlisle, Pennsylvania. My family came and arrived here. Having been born in Afghanistan and raised in the United States, what's interesting is that, you have these dual identities. And really, as a young boy and my family, we're trying to learn what it means to be an American, what it means to be living in America, what it means to identify as American. And so we had 9 families essentially helping us understand what all these things that America represents, and how it operates. And so families would teach us, specific families would teach my family how to drive, or teach my parents how to speak English, or teach us about taxes. It's such an incredible thing to think about what it means to assimilate. And so at home, we spoke Dari, our mother tongue. And then out of the house, we'd have to learn what it meant to be American. So all the customs, norms, traditions of America. Like, I still recall my first Christmas. I still recall my first Halloween. And I just remember being enthralled by these wonderful traditions that we have here in America. Easter. I remember my first Easter egg hunt where I chose an Easter egg that had the winning ticket to win a bicycle in a raffle at the end of that. I can only imagine what my parents had experienced and felt having been in a place like Afghanistan, been in conflict, nearly killed, and now we're in Carlisle, Pennsylvania, which to this day, it always gets on the list of the 25 most livable towns in America. So what does that mean, Chris? It's safe. Everybody knows each other. Everybody knows whose kids go to the elementary school, knows their parents. It's the kind of place where growing up, you didn't have to lock your doors at night. Fascinating in that sense.
One of the things that's fascinating for me is that you came to the United States, you grew up, you eventually graduated from high school in the United States, and then you made the decision at some point that you wanted to go back overseas. And not only that, but you wanted to go into a program that would send you into a very rural and remote place in a very difficult lifestyle. How did that happen? What part of you was expressing that need?
What really kind of set me up to decide to go abroad and eventually serve in the Peace Corps, a few days after I started college, 9/11 happened. And 9/11 really shook the United States. It really showed how the world was so connected. Two worlds that had, quote unquote, nothing to do with each other came together. My father likes to say, the country of our birth, that being Afghanistan, and our adopted country, that being America, came together on 9/11. And so, as a young man, I was really presented with the question of what is it that I'm going to do with this new reality. It's really important to understand why people do what they do, and I wanted firsthand experience of that. And so, when I graduated in 2005, I decided to join the Peace Corps, because if you recall, during that time, the United States had already invaded Afghanistan, ousted the Taliban, ousted Al-Qaeda, and declared victory in Afghanistan, and then set its sights on Iraq. And so in 2005, I was not interested in joining the war in Iraq. The country was really divided, and I decided that I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to be a part of that. So I wanted to serve the United States. I love this country and I wanted to serve. I decided to join the Peace Corps because I knew that it mattered. My father learned enough English from a Peace Corps volunteer named Craig in Kandahar when he was a young boy. And so my father fell in love with the idea of America when he was in Kandahar, which today is notorious for being the home of the Taliban. And so, having been exposed and learning from his volunteer, Craig, he moved to Kabul and eventually got a job at USAID. And that's what started our family's journey to come to America, was my father's interaction with his Peace Corps volunteer in Kandahar in the 1960s.
Peace Corps goal number 2, check.
Right? And the country that I was assigned to is Mozambique, one of the furthest countries in the world from the United States. That experience really taught me as a young 22-year-old when I arrived that I had a lot to learn. It's an incredible thing to be idealistic. It's an incredible thing to think you know everything about the world. It's a good thing because what the world does is it actually humbles you. And that's what serving in the Peace Corps in Mozambique and the community that I served in actually did for me, is that it humbled me.
I'm curious how culture shock presents itself differently when you are an immigrant to America. I know what it's like when I talk to Americans who have never left the country and they go off and they have a particular kind of culture shock. I wonder if it was different for you.
I really appreciate that question. Something that's useful to kind of inform how I understood culture shock and experienced it was that when my family first came to Carlisle, Pennsylvania in 1986, not knowing English, I remember not speaking too much. I remember being a very shy, quiet child. I did a lot of observing, and I recall mirroring children around me. If I saw the way that my friend was holding a pencil and would kind of put his hand through his hair while he was kind of going through the math problems, I would do the same. If I saw a friend put on a jacket a certain way, I would do it the exact same way. In my mind, I was not able to code switch the idea of being Afghan culturally and then also American culturally. I was not able to do that. So what I did was just really observe everybody around me. I didn't speak really until about 4th and 5th grade. I was extremely shy. So how does this affect how I experience Mozambique? There were elements of culture shock being in Mozambique, the way that people operated, the norms and customs. But I think the advantage that I had that was later then expressed to me through my Mozambican colleagues, who basically said to me, like, you're an American, but you're not like the other Americans. You eat like us, you dance like us, you even speak Portuguese much better than the others. Why? And it goes back to my family coming to America and me having to observe and witness. That foundation really set me up to be a chameleon, which was really helpful. I think everybody experiences culture shock and everybody experiences reverse culture shock. But I think some folks are really set up to be more, have a different aptitude to it or a different sense of awareness of it. It's absolutely true what they say, is you can only get wisdom by going out and experiencing the world and through failure, by the way. Wisdom only really comes from failure. Either your own failure or the failure of others that you also witness. I think that's an incredible thing to share, and I think that's an incredible thing to be reminded of often. I knew that that is something that the Peace Corps taught me. I think it's something that going out every single day in terms of trying something out into the world has taught me and continues to teach me. If I had to boil it down, I think it really comes back to my early childhood and having to move between worlds and trying to help people understand each other across those worlds. Right? So when I was young, it was like our community and my family. having been like a young person, understanding English faster than my parents, being that the oldest of 3 boys, being that translator, quote unquote, between us and our new community, or other places that I've lived, or in Mozambique, and then having come back after Mozambique, and then eventually going and serving as an interpreter for the military in Afghanistan. It's this idea of really being compelled to help 2 worlds come together. And I think what's really important about that is that, like, when we think about translation or interpretation, translation is not about words. It's about meaning, intention, and trust. What I've always been really compelled by is meaning and intention, by understanding the greater context. I think that's the thing that the Peace Corps taught me, and I think that's the lesson that Americans need to continue to learn, especially when it comes to American foreign policy, is we try to go into countries with a solution before understanding the context, and that's where we get in trouble.
Having lived through development work in the Peace Corps and seen, kind of at a grassroots level, what was it like to be in a military situation where you had kind of this understanding of, as you said, trust and meaning, and yet you were among people, and I'm not denigrating the military in any way, but you were among people who were not trained. That wasn't what they were trained to do. And I'm just curious about that.
So what's interesting about development work is that development work is really about understanding context, understanding the values and the needs of the community that we're serving, and then doing so over the course of the long term. What the military is about, it's more tactical, and that it's really about fulfilling a mission with a short timeline. With the military, tours of duty last between 6 and 8 months. So folks would come in, they'd learn the lay of the land, and then they'd implement a mission and or multiple missions, and then they'd leave. And then a new team would come in, and they'd often have to repeat the same successes or mistakes. They just kept going and going and going and going. Great development work happens over the long term, whereby the military is very short-term oriented. It's not equipped, I think, to do that sort of thing. All this to say is I learned that very quickly. There was parts of the military that I was a part of called the SOTF teams, Special Operations Task Force. So what the SOTF teams had were development officers, special operations soldiers, intelligence officers, and they were the ones that would go out into the population. So they would go, quote unquote, after bad guys, or they would go and develop a well, a clinic, or a school amongst the population. So it was really a 3-pronged approach. There were elements of development, there were elements of diplomacy, and there were elements of defense that I would go out with, but they all had a different relationship in terms of how they're going to engage the population. Interestingly enough, I was a part of all 3 of them. I think the intention was positive, but again, it came down to not understanding the context of the people and the values that they embodied. Americans, we have a different relationship with time. We are very future-oriented. We are very aspirational in nature. Very little do we ask the question about our ancestors. We all have friends here in the United States, and we don't know their past. We don't know their grandparents. We don't know their names. We don't know any of these things. In fact, we ask each other, who are you and what are you going to do and what do you aspire to do? That's how we engage each other. But in a place like Afghanistan, people are not future-oriented. In fact, it's the opposite. So in a place like Afghanistan, people want to know who your ancestors are. They want to know from which part of the country you hail from. They want to know who your great-grandfather was. They may even forget your first name, but they'll remember your last name because they'll remember where you came from in terms of a tribe or a village. Why is this important as a matter of time? It establishes identity. We in America are very keen to understand what people are trying to achieve. In a place like Afghanistan, people weren't really able to plan a month in advance. And so if you'd ever engage a local Afghan and say, in 6 months' time, we'd like to build this clinic and this school and this well, they would just look at you and say, great, that sounds fine, whatever you'd like. And then you come back and, see how much progress was made. Very little progress was made. And I think that's unique to America's founding. I think that's very unique to America's history. We have a short history. It's also part of our value system here in America is people come here because it was the new land. You could start over. You could have a new identity. Many immigrants to America would come and they'd forget their past. They would change their name. They would not speak their mother tongue because they wanted to be American. In many ways, that's how our country was founded. That was the value that many people kind of embodied. And so that plays out when it comes to American foreign policy. That played out very much when it came to my experience in Afghanistan, Chris.
The Italians have a saying, in America, time is money, and in Italy, time is life. In some ways, given someone who has your interests and someone who has your passions, your job at the Foreign Service Institute, where you got to instruct diplomats who were on their way to their assignments in Afghanistan, gave you such a great opportunity to impart wisdom. And I'm curious if some of what you were just telling me is some of what you tried to get across to your students.
Absolutely. So I had a wonderful time teaching at the Foreign Service Institute where I was a cultural intelligence instructor. What's wonderful about the State Department is that it has so many wonderful diplomats, so many people that want to do so much good around the world. And what's interesting about that experience is that, I think the State Department does a great job of bringing in a lot of talent and a lot of people with a lot of great intentions. And I would lead sessions of 45 to 60 folks, all diplomats going abroad. And I led what's called the Afghan familiarization course, diplomats going to Afghanistan. And so now I'm in a position to kind of really ask questions of diplomats to see how well they know a place or know how to think of a place. And so I'd ask questions like, okay, what are the things that you know about this country? What are the things that you've heard on the news about this country? What is the narrative about this country and about these people? Right? And you get all these types of different responses. And again, this comes back to what has been expressed after 9/11. What was really wonderful about that time and that experience and that, I think that instruction, that place to kind of learn, was that it was all done through Socratic method. So I would just ask a lot of questions. And what's really wonderful about the Socratic method is that the students, in this case, diplomats, were the ones giving the answers. And based on a person's experience, they'd have a different experience. Like to serve in a place like Honduras is very different than to serve in a place like Malaysia. And some diplomats come from, small little towns in Texas, in Kansas, in Idaho. And that's a wonderful thing, by the way. And I think now I was in a place as an instructor to take all these learnings of understanding and to now say, great, how are we going to think about this place? In order to understand a place, what we end up having to do is reflect on who we are as a people. And what's really wonderful about that exercise is that it's very individualistic. Everybody's definition, Chris, of success is different. Some people say it's to be happy. Some people say it's to be rich. For some people, it's to be educated. But if we were to ask that question in a place like Afghanistan, the number one response would be to have a family. To have a family, right? And so everything in that society then is structured for marriage and to have a family. These are the types of questions that I would ask at the State Department during my time there.
I just finished watching your most recent film, and I wanted to ask you about your transition from this world of being a translator and then working in Foreign Service Institute to becoming a storyteller through film. What made you decide that you wanted to become a filmmaker and a storyteller? And then how you use that art to help further these stories or these questions that you've been following your whole life?
What's interesting about filmmaking is I fell into it through language. After serving as an interpreter in Afghanistan for 3 years, I came back to Washington, D.C., and I was going to graduate school. And a friend put me in touch with 2 filmmakers who had captured a lot of footage in Afghanistan, and they wanted to better understand what the footage was saying. So they needed a translator interpreter to help them understand what all this footage was about. Their names were Mo Scarpelli and Alexandria Bobak, and the film is a film called Frame by Frame, which is about 4 photojournalists that put their lives in danger to capture the truth. And after watching the footage, I was completely compelled by it. I remember being in post-production with them, going through this footage and translating, and just being really, really, really intrigued by how this whole thing worked. But the power of filmmaking didn't really hit me until I watched an audience go into a theater, watch this film, and come out with a completely different perspective of Afghanistan. And that's when I realized the power of filmmaking. And that's when I realized the power of storytelling. That's when my journey in terms of filmmaking began, is it started with language. And so I started to help other folks in their films when it came to language, interpretation, cultural intelligence, meaning making, and perspective taking. So I was doing this, Chris, simultaneously while I was teaching at the Foreign Service Institute. I decided to become a full-time filmmaker in 2021 with the collapse of the country. And I got involved in a film with National Geographic called Retrograde. And it captures the last 9 months of the United States' involvement in Afghanistan. And that film was a historic film. This was the first time in America's history that when it was decided to withdraw a country the United States was occupying, we actually have it on film. Not just photographs, on film. And it went on to be nominated for 6 Emmy Awards. We won 3. And that really gave me the courage to basically go out on my own and make films full time. As you've alluded to, and you've mentioned, my latest film is a film called Champions of the Golden Valley. And it's about a small ski community in Bamyan that took up skiing and implemented what's called a ski challenge that would bring people from all over Bamyan together in this competition to become the best and the fastest skier. The film is about hope in unexpected places. And it's also about the power of sport, Chris. How skiing of all sports, brought this community in Afghanistan that had ethnic and religious differences together. It's a film about how the ski community came together through sport and was broken apart by the Taliban takeover in 2021. And how the protagonist, Ali Shah, fled and had to restart his life in Germany. And the film's gone on to win multiple jury awards, audience awards. It's now nominated for a Sports Emmy. It was recently acquired by the Olympics, and we're really proud of it. Being a filmmaker has been such an incredible experience, and it's allowed me to do what I think I was meant for, was bridging worlds together. It's been able to help me do that at scale now.
A little while after our conversation, the film did indeed win the Sports Emmy.
I think what's really powerful about the film is that it shows a side of Afghanistan that is so unexpected. And it shows a people and characterizes a people that I think is very counter to the narrative of Afghanistan. I think for so long, again, going back to 9/11, for so long, it's been said that, Afghanistan is the home of terrorism. It's the home of extremism. It's the home of intolerance. But what this film shows you is that these people are very much like us. These people have so much in common with us as a matter of interests, desires, goals, aspirations.
It's an amazing film. And the people are, I could go on for a long time. They have such a sense of style, even though they have so little. But the style that they have is just off the charts. They are so their own people. And it is so amazing to watch. Are you able to follow some of these people and continue learning about their stories?
We as a team are. We're able to follow many people, many girls who are part of the ski team who've escaped, made it to Europe and the United States. Also Ali Shah. But it's also important to say that, it's not everybody left. Half of the folks that you saw in the film are still in Bamyan, still in Afghanistan. Some of them are doing well. Some of them are able to get on their feet. Others, not so much. I think it's important to kind of talk about the idea of moral injury. I think a lot of folks were really, really distraught and disturbed and still kind of deal with a lot of trauma from that time. But again, the Afghan people are extremely resilient. So a lot of them are doing really well in places like Germany and France and the UK and the United States. But I think it's really important to say that girls now to this day are not allowed to ski in Afghanistan after the Taliban takeover. So that's a major loss. I think it showed the world that when a community is torn apart and when people have to decide to leave because their lives are in danger, that refugees like Ali Shah, like my family, are able to contribute to the communities that they're a part of in a meaningful way, that are able to offer value to the communities that they're a part of. It's really about this idea of understanding that, well, what happens in a far-off world actually is closer than we think. And what we decide to do as Americans in a far-off world will actually impact us in ways that we cannot begin to imagine. Hopefully the film shows that there's hope in unexpected places and that sport is really a catalyst for connection. Refugees have a soft spot in my heart, mostly because my family, we experienced what it was like to be refugees in Pakistan and what it was like to have to start completely from scratch, to start completely over. What's really important about this, and I'd like to just name this for us. Refugees had a life before coming to a place like America. Refugees had a sense of identity and a community where they were valued before coming to a new country. Forces beyond their control led them to leave everything behind for a better life, for a safer life, for a life for their children. I shared this, but refugees have a soft spot in my heart because of what my parents gave for me and my brothers. I always am reminded of how difficult it is to navigate a new land, a new cultural experience through my time by being in the Peace Corps. The first time my mother had ever left her neighborhood was when my parents decided to flee the country. That was the first time she left her neighborhood, Chris. And she came to America. When she came here, she was 24 with 2 boys who were children. She didn't know English. She didn't know anything about this place called America. And yet, she started a life with my dad. They built a life here. They're contributing members of the society here. They sent 3 boys to school. My brothers and I are all doing well for ourselves. So refugees, I feel like, man, in this divided political landscape that we're a part of, refugees have been under this umbrella of being demonized. Part of my life's work is to counter that narrative. Because of my lived experience, because of Ali Shah, for example, in Champions of the Golden Valley, and so many others. I think refugees have just been demonized, and it's not fair to them, and it's not fair to who they are and what it is that they can contribute to their communities.
Well, that means we're coming to the end of the episode, but I don't want to stop until I give Baktash the chance to answer our dubious Aunt Deb.
With all that's going on in the world, I can't even think about other places' problems. We need to first deal with our own.
What I would say to my dubious aunt is that I understand why it can feel like we should focus inward, but what I've seen is that the world doesn't stay, quote unquote, over there. I think the way that we understand or misunderstand other people eventually comes back home. I think that's the greatest lesson of 9/11. Beyond that, life's about people. When you've lived with people, broken bread with them, seen their struggles, I find it very hard to believe that engagement doesn't matter. In fact, in all conflict, engagement matters.
Baktash Ahadi is a 2-time Emmy Award-winning documentary filmmaker, storyteller, and leadership facilitator whose work explores the human experience across cultures, conflict, and connection. Born in Afghanistan and raised in the United States, his life and career have been shaped by a deep commitment to understanding how people make meaning of their lives and how stories can bridge divides between worlds. He began his international work as a Peace Corps volunteer in Mozambique, where he first confronted the gap between intention and reality in development work. He later served as a civilian interpreter with U.S. Special Operations in Afghanistan, navigating not just language, but the complex cultural and human dynamics of war. These experiences led him to the U.S. Department of State, where he taught cultural intelligence to diplomats, helping them better understand how perception, context, and communication shape global relationships. Today, Ahadi brings these insights into his filmmaking. His work has been recognized at major festivals, including Tribeca and Telluride. His latest film, Champions of the Golden Valley, was recently named the winner of the Emmy for Outstanding Sports Documentary, and it is currently streaming on the Olympics Channel. His upcoming film, Soul Wounds, examines the inner life of combat veterans as they navigate trauma and healing through equine training. Across all of his work, Ahadi is driven by a simple belief that stories, when told with honesty and care, can deepen understanding, foster empathy, and reveal the shared humanity that connects us all, which sounds a little bit like a certain podcast I know. For more, visit baktashahadi.org or visit our show notes at softpowerfulstories.org. Much of the music in this episode is from the Champions of the Golden Valley soundtrack and is used with the kind permission of the composer Joaquin Gomez. For more information, again, check the show notes at softpowerfulstories.org. Thank you, as always, for listening. We appreciate your support. If you haven't already followed us, liked us, left a review, or even if you haven't done it lately, do it again. There's no time like the present. For more information about the show, including links to our guests' work, photos of them in action, and a chance to get in touch with us, visit softpowerfulstories.org. We would love to hear from you. Special thanks to my friend Kathy Zilski for playing dubious Aunt Deb, who she is, of course, nothing like. My name is Christopher Wurst. I'm the host and producer of Soft Powerful Stories. Until next time.